Okay. Excuse me. Good day, class. Apologize for my voice. I'm under the weather a little bit right now, so please bear with me. All right. So this week we're gonna talk about event bidding, and so as you start to plan your event, it's crucial that you go through the event or the bidding process, and this is normal for any kind of contract negotiations, and when people are trying to um, select a venue or select a particular country or state or individual that they want to, create a competitive environment in which you can get the best possible matchup between the event host and the venue itself, right? And so when we look at event bidding, we look across the board and open it up to interested parties who are going to submit proposals, right? And if you've done any contracting, you know how that process goes. You submit a proposal, so it goes to bid, and then once it goes to bid, all the offers get looked at, and then whichever is the most, optimal offer, the one that makes the most sense, at the best price, providing the best quality and the best product, that's the one that normally gets chosen. So, different, depending on what the venue is or what the event is, that's to say, and what the entity is. Like the government has a different bidding process, but it's pretty much the same. It's just the criteria for who gets selected is a little different. Okay. Um, bidding process is competitive, and you know, countries, states, people try really hard to put together the best proposal they can so that they're selected to host the event or to have the event at their place, at their host country or whatever the case may be. Okay, so we look at typical events or typical host for sporting events. You look at sports commission. We look at my events and visitors bureau, civic organizations. As you can tell, these are all either city or governmental agencies or just big companies in general, but convention centers and city hall and the city management team, or the planning team, city planning team, I should say, will look at all the possible events that are out there and which ones they think would be a good fit for the city, right, or for the town, or whatever the case may be, right? For larger events, city and county may serve as a host, which we do have, right? We have the Olympics, we have the Paralympics, we have Comic Con in San Diego. There's some other ones we have that are hosted by the city, but the entities, private entities like Home Depot or Qualcomm, for instance. And so you'll have different um, companies and stuff that are being hosted by the city for their event. Okay, so potential hosts are willing to bid for events for a variety of reasons. All right, one, whenever you host an event, there's always the potential to make money. Okay, we're trying to generate revenue for the city. So just thinking about the costs that go into, putting the event on, those should be offset by the amount of economic impact that's going to be had by the people coming to the event, dining out, the hotels they have to stay in, all the bars and all the other things that they're doing, all the cultural activities that they're participating in. For San Diego, a lot of people go to Balboa Park, they'll go to Legoland, they'll turn it into kind of a family event sometimes, family trip. And so they'll end up in different places, doing those things. And so, um, so you can definitely see where the generation of revenue is coming from, right? All the local attractions, people may go to decide to go to LA, to go to Disney or go to Universal Studios, you just go to LA in general to see Hollywood and that type of thing, right? And so with anything that's within the vicinity, usually will have some benefit uh, from the event being held, right? Also, the event can help in um, helping the city speed up the process of, enhancing their or building back up their infrastructure facilities. it's important that cities have the proper venue in which to host certain events, right? Comic Con is a pretty big event, and so we have to have the space, the business centers, the appropriate space for Comic Con. Although Comic Con has grown exponentially, and San Diego is no longer really um, suitable location due to size for Comic Con, the city took it upon itself to try to figure ways out in which to expand the capacity, right? How can we, expand on the convention center, or are there other venues that we can build that will help in bringing in, other events, right? Because we have the facilities, right? We can do, we can hold soccer matches, we can do football, we can do concerts, we can do, equestrian and dog shows, those kind of things, right? You got to figure out, okay, do I have the facilities citywide for me to host those kind of things, okay? It also helps in, just clean up the image of the city, right? Because if you have an event going on in your city, you want the city to be represented well. And so you're going to make all the effort you can to make sure that streets are clean. If there's any, homeless or any, criminal activity, that normally gets, kind of taken care of very quickly. And so, we're trying to, bring money in at the same time, build the infrastructure, but also add value for the local people, right? The people that live in the community, right? If your house is around the corner, they're just saying PB and they're holding a sandcastle building event, right? Which is something they do quite often in Imperial Beach and in Del Mar, at Moon Beach. Um, you know, the people that live around there benefit from that because people come again to those areas, and not only do they spend their money, but they get to see the houses and they enjoy the beach and get to mingle with the local folks, right? And again, trying to showcase the community is always a big thing, right? So here's some examples of event seeking bids, all right? So you can see you got the event name, how long it's gonna last, the number of athletes or participants, um, room night, okay, how many nights they're gonna, room, and it's an aggregate value, so that's everyone and the number of rooms they're gonna need, or the nights they're gonna need to stay anyway, and then the right fee. So basically, how much is it gonna cost for us to, you know, get this event, right? How much is it gonna cost us to kind of put a down payment sort of on the event and say, hey, we want to bid for this event. Here's our, our seed money sort of, right? Here's our deposit saying we want to come in, right? And the right piece really is to kind of give everyone a chance to put some skin in the game, right? We don't want to go through this whole process with these cities and with organizations trying to hold an event and you're not really serious about it. So we really want to make sure that everybody's invested. So in order to do that, we say, hey, we need some earnest money. Just like buying a house, you put a down payment. The down payment signifies, or at least demonstrates, that you are somewhat serious about purchasing a home. And so, because of that, you have some, real interest and real drive to make sure that everything is going well. Okay. All right. So we look at the economic impact. We're looking at the net change in the economy as a result of hosting the event. Okay. So impact visitor spending, right? Number of visitors, average spending per visitor, time to multiply. Whatever the multiplier is, right? Direct spending, indirect spending, reduced spending, direct spending. Just in the end of the day, it's all spending, right? But it all depends on how it affects each particular, kind of component of the economy, right? So if you go to a restaurant, that is directly impacting that restaurant's bottom line. But that money is also impacting the restaurant suppliers, the restaurant, and other liabilities that they have, because all that money is contributing to their revenue. So they're going to pay for that stuff, right? Using the money that they garner from the event being held. So you got to keep all that in mind as far as determining the economic impact. Business spending, like I said, a couple of different ways. You get hotels and lodging, right? Some people do Airbnb. In addition, to, the hotels. You got parking, you got rental cars. Um, sometimes you have people shopping, buying clothes because they are in a certain area and maybe they pack appropriately, or maybe they just want to go shopping in general, right? Of course, food and beverage, right? People are gonna buy stuff. They're gonna go shopping about other things aside from clothing. Entertainment is a huge aspect of it because once the event is done or there's other things going on, people want to stay entertained and they're gonna get involved in other activities. And so that money is being generated through that avenue also. And then the taxes and the charges where really the city makes kind of their money, right? Because there's a tax on everything, right? The airport tax, hotel tax, taxi tax, airport fees. Airbnb has a tax, there's taxes everywhere. So those taxes, they're generated um, in order to compensate the city, the state, and that's kind of their cut, right? That's the city's cut, and that's how the city generates revenue that they use to, do infrastructure projects and other things that the city needs, build schools and that kind of thing, right? So that's kind of where all that money comes from, right? So sometimes, you know, the there'll be an over exaggeration or overstating of the economic impact, right? So basically, we're saying that the economic impact that's going to happen um, is going to be tremendous when it really isn't, right? It may be a very minimal economic impact, or maybe a very focused or centralized economic impact where it's only going to have an impact on, a very small area or a certain area where it's like, okay, with, San Diego County alcohol is going to benefit from this particular event, right, or something like that. And so, um, you know, you don't want to overstate that because if you overstate that, then you're going to have an overstatement of your budget and your revenue expectations, and then you're going to come in short, and maybe you have allocated certain funds or different projects that for money that you're not really generating, right? So you gotta be real objective and be conservative and kind of, you know, err on the side of caution, right? You got to make sure you account for, leakage. You got to make sure you account for theft. You got to make sure you account for, leakage is kind of theft or things being misappropriated or, things is coming up missing, right? That's always going to happen. Right? So you have to account for that within your budget, right? Um, uh, and also not really inflating the numbers, right? Not inflating the multiplier, um, and only make sure when you do your accounting, you know you account for the cost and not just the benefits, right? You make sure that you accurately get a good picture of the cost because that's really where you're gonna see how much money you're making, right? Because it's all about the cost. So every cost it costs you to make, I need to make more than that, and whatever the difference between those two, right, the revenue generated and the cost of goods sold, that is basically, my profit, right? My gross profit. That's not in my net profit problem. So I have to look at that, right? Um, so next thing is really, the sports commission, right? When we look at sports commission, it's just an entity, and their job is to make sure that we bring in um, sporting events. Okay, that's the end of the day. We're trying to make sure that, or they're trying to make sure that there's enough sporting or competitive activities that people will want to come to, the city, state, county, whatever the case may be. And their job is to seek out, those events and make it appealing for people to come to a certain place. Now, there's certain, cities and states that have an advantage over other cities and states, right? San Diego, everybody likes coming there because it's warm, it's nice, the beach, the weather is always favorable for the most part. There's plenty to do aside from the beach at night. And there's so many areas, and LA is pretty much close driving proximity, with a large center of business and culture that is resident in LA and some of the other areas. So sports commissions definitely strive to um, bring in the best uh, competitions and host as many events as they can, of course, based on the resources available to us. Okay. All right. So let's get into the bidding process itself, right? So during the bidding process, what happens, the first thing is what we call RFP, request for proposal. And so the request for proposal basically lays out all the requirements that the event holders, right, are looking for, right? Let's say the Olympic Committee, or let's just say whatever the committee is looking for a venue, right? They have RFP, so basically it provides all the details for the event, where what the event is, what specific criteria we're looking for, and outlines the specifications, basically the scope, right? That's really what it is. It's the scope of the event, right? So this the RFP lays out what we're looking for as far as like, we want a stadium, do we want a particular part in Petco where we want to do a concert, but we don't need the whole park, we don't need the ballpark itself, we just need the out exterior, or maybe we need to use the stadium that SDSU uses, that the former Qualcomm Stadium. We need you know this many people to be able to come and enjoy the event. You do have specific, you have the locker rooms and all the things that go with, sports, right? Because the athletes need a stadium. The athletes need a full-fledged professional grade stadium. And so you have to make sure you have all those things and you lay those things out in the bidding process. And that's really what the bidding process and RFP is about, is laying out all the requirements that are necessary for the event to happen, all the things that I need, right? And at a minimum, right, it has the date, the kind of the personnel I'm gonna need to have, and all the fees and kind of the money that I need to, garner to make sure that we have everything we need. Okay. Now, when you put in your bid, all right, um, usually it's very unlikely that the lowest bid, the minimum bid, is going to win. All right. Um, One thing that you know that you want to do is, whatever the bid price is, or the bid entry, or whatever the bid is in general, right? That they are looking for, right? Um, you're gonna have to bid more than that, right? If the hosting on the event managers are like, hey, we're gonna need like a $2 million proposal, or we're gonna need somebody to do it for like 2.5, that may be their very minimum, or it may encompass all the costs and everything, but that's probably not going to be the bid that wins. It's probably going to be the bid that says, hey, I can do it for 1.5, or I can do it for 2 million, and this is how I'm going to do it and meet all your requirements also, right? When you put in your your RFP, right, and just say, hey, this is what we're going to do. Okay. Um, Organization requesting bids. They also look at the host's location, just to make sure that the location, as far as infrastructure and just, the community, as far as being a good community that has lots of support for the sport, there's not going to be any, you know, political or, local, you know, um, distractions, right? There's nothing going on in the city that is going to cause us to see protesters outside, or get, people in a position of getting harmed or affiliated with something they didn't come to, really get involved in. So we gotta be cognizant of that also. Okay. And the bid, the RFP really kind of lays out, hey, we want to make sure that you guys have the proper transportation, the housing, and all the other support stuff that we need to make sure that we can, put the event on at the how we want to put it. Okay. And so you also have, a feasibility study. And the feasibility study really is just assesses, the viability of everything that's available, right? So we have a feasibility study, there's a stadium, we're gonna rate the stadium. We're gonna say, okay, on a scale of 1 to 10, what do you think about the stadium? Can the stadium support X, Y, Z, da da da? And then if your stadium is an 8 out of 10, then okay, it's feasible, right? If it's a 5, then maybe it's not feasible. Maybe we can't look at it, right? But it also, um, looking at, if the benefits outweigh the cost, then they may say, hey, you know what, this is a pretty good deal. We can do this, right? Um, they're asking for $2 million, right? Or maybe they don't have anything. They just say, hey, put your bid in, right? And then we'll see, who comes in with the best bid. It's all about really being able to maximize your infrastructure, your support, your suppliers, your vendors, right? And working with them in order to kind of lower some of the costs as compared to other people that are bidding, right? And putting in the best bid because you really don't know anybody else's bid, right? All the bids are anonymous as far as like whose bid is whose. The only thing that gets to see the bid are the actual committee that's deciding on which bid to choose. Okay. So look at the previous study again. Like I said, are the facilities appropriate and available? Do you have financial resources to host? Do you have human resources to host, right? Which is really an important aspect because in many instances, you just can't think of HR as being, like support staff. You got to think about HR as being like law enforcement, right? You got to think of HR as being, cleanup crew, right? To clean up the vicinity, the area. You got to think about security, right? That's also HR, right? You have the human resource. That the city that's hosting have the capability to support the law enforcement requirements that are going to be needed, right? You have support from stakeholders, right? Is the mayor on board? Are the city council on board? Are the aldermen and councilmen and all those people? The local government, are they on board? Are the business on board? Is the community in general on board, right? There's some events that the community may not want in their area, right? They may say, you know what, we don't want all that, and we don't want this event being held here. So, find someplace else to hold your event, right? And then what's going to be the cost, right? That's really, it kind of lays out some other things, right? So here we had the feasibility, most feasibility study stuff, right? Questions that we think about, what revenues make sense from hosting, what other opportunities may arise, from hosting. Do we have the time to appropriately execute the event, right? Which is a big thing, especially if you look at the Olympics, right? Um, there's a reason why we select the Olympic, host or venue like years in advance or decades even in advance because you need to give the city or the country time to possibly build up the infrastructure, right? If we look at China, or was it Japan? I can't remember. A couple of the last Olympics in the build up to getting ready for the Olympics, right? When you look at LA when they were getting ready for the Olympics, they cleaned up a lot, but they had to build a few things, right? And so that is the case with most instances that the city, depending on the size of the event, may need some time to build the infrastructure. This is why the bidding process starts very early, 5, 6, 7 years ahead of time, to give the authorities and the people the appropriate time to assess the actual feasibility of the likelihood of this happening and what they think they do. Okay. So some big documents, right? Purpose statement is the first one, right? And within the purpose statement, you're gonna find all these particular aspects of it all. Okay, you're gonna find the host organization, support facility, transportation, security. So all those little details will be found in the purpose statement. Right? If you're really trying to win the bid, right, here's some tips, right? You have to be able to demonstrate your capability, okay? You have to do your research. You have to demonstrate support from stakeholders, right? You have to make sure that people that are, funding the event and people that are, intimately involved, they support this veterinary support, their name being used or they're sponsoring it, like Toyota does Stagecoach. And so they are 100% behind Stagecoach, right? They're hosting the event, right? But they're sponsoring the event, but who's hosting it, right? In Indio and Palm Springs, that area, they're hosting the event. So what goes into all that, right? Who do I need to talk to make sure that we have full support from the community, right? And then you need to really show or make a strong case for why you should, host it, be the one to host the venue, right? Host the event, right? Not only with, the fact that you want to assess the cost and give the best financial, perspective that you can as far as it relates to how much it will cost to hold the event, right? You don't want to underestimate and um, kind of sell yourself short as a hosting venue, right? But you need to make sure that you put your best foot forward and really highlight the best aspects of the city, and you are truthful about how much it's going to cost you to host the event at the level that the event managers or event people are looking for. Right? All right, it's time take a quick 2-minute break. We're going to switch gears to another PowerPoint. All right, so let's look at event budget, right? So we talked about event bidding, right? But then that's one side of it, right? But now we've gotten, to the point where we found our venue and we have to figure out, okay, what's our budget going to be? How much money are we looking at in spending to make sure that this event goes off without a hitch, right? So we look at your budget. Again, it's just an estimate of revenues and expenditures, right? And really, the budget is, used to kind of keep the expenses on track and to keep everything in line and that we don't overspend and have kind of what we call mission creep, where little things start popping up that we necessarily weren't accounted for as far as money wise, and now we're going over budget, right? And so this is where it's important that you have a very strong, um, project manager or event coordinator, or somebody who's financially capable of making sure that they're earning budget overruns and they have a strong team that emphasis, hey, let's make sure that we stay on or under budget, right? You may go over budget, but you don't want to go over budget too much because as you start, the more you go over budget, the more you cut into your profits, right? You cut into the revenue, which increases your profits, right? So the benefits of budgeting, right? Again, help either organizers recognize and maximize revenue streams, reduce waste, okay, by identifying scrutinizing expense categories, uh, communicates financial limitations to management and employees, and empowers managers to make good decisions with available funds. So when you look at the budgeting as a whole, we're trying to paint a picture of what are our lower and upper limits when it comes to our budget, right? What's the minimum we're looking to spend? What's the maximum we're looking to spend? Okay. And then for each area, they'll break down even more to where, okay, you have $100,000 for marketing, I have $50,000 for, miscellaneous, I have, $10,000 for overtime, or whatever the case may be, right? But your budget should encompass every little bit of, expense or cost that you think you're gonna run into, just to make sure that you're not delving into, you know, going over budget and going into money that you would start to eat into your profit. Okay. Now, when you go to budget, you want to make sure that you have some sort of, buffer in there, right? But, typically, 10% on the overall cost is always a good measure to use as far as how much of a buffer you can put into your budget. So what you don't want to do is to set a budget and then have cost overruns and have to go back to, finance or the CFO or whoever's managing money and say, I need more money, right? That's not a good look. You don't want that. You don't want to have to, keep going back for money because then they're going to start asking questions about how you're managing the money and why do you consistently need to come um, ask for money over and over again. And they're going to call into question your ability to account for the expenses and having done the proper legwork, right, beforehand to make sure you captured all the costs, right, and that you were aware of all these costs and kind of unexpected things, right? So there are going to be some costs that, of course, are unexpected, right? That we didn't account for that occur because of something else happening that we did account for, but second and third order effects, that's just name of the game, right? It's part of the whole package, right? But we have to be prepared for those things. We have to remember, like, hey, if this goes wrong, boom, this is what's going to happen, right? How's it going to impact these other things? And we have to pick, assign a dollar value to that, right? And be prepared for that. Now, if we don't use it, that's great, right? That'll be surplus. But at the same time, we have to be prepared for those unforeseen events that may occur, lack in human resource that you may have to go out and get some auxiliary force, some auxiliary people to come in and really help you work. So there's a lot of things when you look at the budgeting that you kind of want to make sure that the budget shows or demonstrates. So different types of budget. Like you got the preliminary budget where you kind of first working out the kinks and kind of, hey, this is just the, kind of a draft, right? And the things that we think that are going to come about, right? Then you have your working budget, which is, your updated budget with revenues and expenses, all right, that are realized, all right? And so when we say they're realized, it's basically saying, hey, this has happened and we spent the money on it, right? So we realized it. Until it's realized, it's really just a moving number, right? It's a notional number. It's not. It's still at a budget. It's still an estimate. Once you realize it, once you pay the security company for their services, that expense is realized, right? Or you get some money from the city as far as concessions for bringing the event to the city. Those are revenues that are realized. But only then do they go to the working budget so that you can keep track of, what the actual real-time live balance of your budget is, right? And not an estimate, okay? So when you're looking at the budgeting process, right, you want to align the budget with your organizational goals, okay? You want to do some research. You want to estimate revenues and expenses, and then project profits and losses, right? So again, that's the whole function of the budget, right? To kind of lay out what your expenses and revenues are going to be and what your projected profits and losses are going to be, right? Hopefully you have no losses, or if you do have losses, they're minimal, and that you have accounted for certain things and that it will not take a bite into your profit at a certain level because once, in most cases, there is a certain amount of money that is guaranteed or expected by certain entities, right? The city's going to expect this much. So regardless of what you make, as profits or losses, the city's expecting this much. So you may very well end up losing money on the deal after you pay everybody their cut, right? Their percentage of whatever it is that was agreed upon in the contract and in the bidding process in the RFP, right? All right, some sources of internal information, right? When you're looking at your budget, and this is for any budget across the board, right? It doesn't matter, sporting event budget, your personal own budget, it doesn't matter, right? Historical information is always going to be probably your starting point, right? What do we do in the past? How did the budget look in the past? Because for the most part, things probably haven't changed. Prices of costs have gone up in certain instances, but for the most part, the things that are required to put on um, an annual event probably haven't changed, unless the concept behind the event totally gets revamped and that kind of thing. You can garner a lot of information as far as budget goes from your historical, data, right? Which we would call it kind of a naive budget, right? That's what we term it. So naive budget just looks at past budgets or historical budgets that we used before and try to see, okay, is that still the same, right? Um, does that still fit, right? Where do we need to tweak and change certain things? What's new, what's going down in cost, what's increasing cost, inflation, all these things, right? COVID, all these things go into play once we look at the historical information, try to figure that out, right? Financial statements, of course, right? We got to look at the revenue expenses from previous events and kind of see what were some of the pitfalls and challenges that other venues had when they held this event, right? Other cities, what kind of issues did they run into, or what problems did they face, or what benefits did they reap that they didn't realize they would reap, right? They kind of look at those things and figure that out, right? And then you are management staff feedback, right? For the most part, once you get your budget together, you're going to farm it out to all the vested parties, right? And then they're going to look at their own budget to make sure that the proper funds are allocated towards, um, for their activities, right? And so they're going to look at the budget that's as proposed, and then they're going to make amendments to the budget and say, look, you allocated 50,000 for marketing. It's actually going to cost 55,000, and this is why, right? You make these changes and you justify the change, right? Or justify the adjustment as far as increase or decrease, right? And then it's up to the final authority to say yes, this is approved at this level at 55,000, or no, it's not approved at this level. It's approved at 50,000. Your budget's going to stay the same, right? And then you may have meetings to eliminate some things, and then once that comes back, that's your opportunity to say, well, if the budget's going to stay at 50,000, we're not going to be able to do X, Y, Z, right? And then that way they can actually weigh out if they want to not do the budget increase, right? So they can say, well, X is really important, or X would be nice, or Y would be nice. So guess what? Let's just give them the extra money, increase the budget, and then see what happens from there. Okay. So getting staff and management feedback is important because those particular uh, units or departments have their own, that's kind of where the budget is built, right? Really, those where the details and the execution is going to happen. So they're important because that's really where your cost overruns are going to happen, right? They're not really going to happen at the huge macro level. If they do happen at the huge, macro level, it's usually pretty catastrophic, because then if you're talking about a big mess up or a big screw up at the highest level, so at the in aggregate, it's going to be pretty bad, right? The management and staff of departments with their smaller budgets, they're the ones that contribute to the aggregate or bigger budget, right? And so it's important that you capture all their costs adequately and to understand like amount of this budget is going to get you this result or this outcome or these particular resources. Um, we look at source of external information. We look at the current and potential vendors, right? Um, can we find a vendor that that can do the work or do the thing that we need at a certain cost, right? Is it lower? And we're gonna do our own request for proposal or bidding process for our vendors if we don't have established vendors already. This is the beauty of contracting and being not a large entity, but an established entity, right? They usually have vendors that are established and have been vetted and they use on a regular basis that will provide them the quality, quantity, will meet the timeline, and the cost that they're looking for, right? And so you kind of have to look at those things, and depending on what the vendor's asking for, right, that goes into the budget and that has to be taken into consideration, right? Industry trends. There's things that you have to look at as far as what particular things come with that particular industry. Let's just say you're doing something like in Vegas with the CEI, the Computer Electronics Show, right? Um, you got to think about like how much electricity does that take, right? That's maybe something you don't think about, but what's the electricity bill going to look like for that particular convention center that's holding that event? It's going to be more than normal, right? It's going to be more than normal because of all the things that TI brings. They all require some kind of energy source, right? So it's going to be more than you anticipate. So you got to be prepared for that, right? Um, Professional associates and trade publications are another source of getting information. They kind of are kind of the subject matter experts. They will give you some idea of what to expect with some of the industry nuances and some of the things that are new or up and coming in the industry and things that you need to look at or consider when you put the event on. Right? Another important aspect is to look at when it comes to budget, competing events. Excuse me. What other events are going on that I'm going to have to possibly share resources with, right? And do I need to, add some extra costs into the budget so that I can get additional resources, right? Because if I have 2 or 3 events going on and they all need security, right? There's only so much security that can go around, right? I may need to contract security outside of my local area, right? And from another city or maybe um, another state in general, right? I may need to do that and get a vendor that's going to provide me a security team um, for that. Or I may request the city provide law enforcement. And so how much overtime is that going to cost me, right? For different events going on because the police uh, can only be so efficient so many times. And so we have to look at, what different things are going on. So that's why you'll see in many instances where there'll be a couple of events going, but usually events are staggered, right? Because we don't want to allocate too many resources to one thing, or we don't want to not have the ability to support multiple events going on. So we need to look at that and how does that impact the budget, right? Revenues, of course, that's where we get into the real nitty gritty of things. And the money aspect of it all, okay? And trying to figure out, how much money do we expect to come in from the event, right? For these sales and goods and services, right? Really, you want to try to figure out how much, money you're going to get from each category, right? Food and beverage is always kind of a big deal, right? And assessing how much revenue you're going to generate from that, because people, will want to eat, drink, the kids with the candy and the popcorn and other things, the hot dogs, but you know, um, revenue, estimation or budgeting or understanding what the revenue is going to be is an important aspect of the whole process. Right? Then you have the tickets and uh, types of revenues, and then uh, types of revenues and tickets, registration, membership. You got sponsorship, you got parking, you got publications, right? Media rights. So you got revenues coming from all these entities or different places that you have to, kind of account for and just make sure like, okay, how much revenue is coming from each of these things, right? And then once I look at the revenues, I can figure out how much the cost is going to be for, all those things also, okay? And so when you look at the type of revenues, you figure out the publications and, that kind of thing. Um, you can go from there and know what's going on. So here's a sample, right, of revenue projection for tennis competition. All right, we got the price registration, capacity, maximum revenue, expected registration, and expected revenue. Okay, so if everything goes to plan like we think, right, notice that there's a buffer here between the capacity and the expected registration, right? So the capacity is 48, but we're expecting 40. capacity is 24, but we're expecting 18, right? Now, we may very well get 48, we may very well get 24, but we're not planning for that. We're planning for, you know, a smaller number than our capacity because we're not going to necessarily max out all the time. And usually don't max out because, well, one's a fire hazard, right? We want to be at capacity. That's not legal, and it causes a safety concern. So the fire department and those folks are not necessarily going to let you exceed capacity. But you see what I'm talking about as far as having a buffer in which you have room to expect to max out your revenue, but you also have a realistic expectation of what you're going to get based on prior predictions and based on prior attendance at the event and based on the registration and the information that we provided for you currently, right, at present. Right? So we got your expenses, right? That's basically the money that's, flowing out of the event, right? And really, you're spending money to make money, right? And so that's the name of the game, and that's what most people go into business, right? That's what they do, right? You have to spend money to make money, right? So the whole point though is to spend less money, right, than you're taking in. Okay, so that's the trick right there. Um, that's the whole thing. It's trying to um, get get your cost down, uh, which will increase your revenue, which will of course increase your profit. Okay. So different types of expenses here. We have event operations, insurance, right, capital investment, player related costs, right, which you have to keep under control, right, marketing promotion, miscellaneous expenses and contingency allowances, right, very important, right, to have make sure you have a dollar amount attached to those things, right, and that's kind of where the buffer comes in, right. Um, the miscellaneous expenses, 10%. Contingency, what are some of the things that can likely be an issue, you know, um, that could be, something of a problem, right? And that we may have to pivot and do something else or have an alternate plan, right? How much is that going to cost and what do we need to allocate to that? So, I'm sorry. So tips for budgeting success, right? Again, it's about doing your research, right? It's about being very meticulous in monitoring your income expenses, okay? And to also always go back in and reforecast. That's an important aspect. The monitoring of income expenses and the reforecasting are extremely important because you want to always have an idea of what is the real time running count, running tally of your budget. Okay. And so you need to know all the income and expenses. And so it's important that all the people that work for you are involved in the event, putting the event together, that they um, submit or do their accounting in a timely manner so that you have the most current and up-to-date information, right? And so usually with budgets, and if you're managing a budget, it's a weekly process. It's not, every couple of days. You update your budget, right? You update the numbers, and then the numbers will get updated in the, overall for the total event. But each department updates their numbers on a regular basis, so they have an understanding of how much money they're spending, and if they're close to the budget and under budget, over budget, that kind of thing, and where those cost overruns may be coming from, so that they can go and kind of control those things, right? They can kind of nip it in the bud and say, hey, you know what? No more overtime this week, right? Or hey, we're spending too much time on this particular aspect, right? When we didn't allocate that much money for this, we allocated this much money for it. And so you need to, either go in and, re-engineer your process, or you're going to have to, take a loss on this particular aspect of the project or the event, and you're gonna eat the cost, right? And this is the individual vendors. So sometimes the vendors do a very poor job in budgeting themselves. And so if they come in under, you know, if they give you a price or cost estimate and then they come over that, they may be looking to you to say, oh, you know what, we didn't estimate properly, we didn't budget properly, so we need to increase the money that you need to pay us. And more likely, be like, nope, I don't think so. We had a contract, we set a price, this is what it is. As a vendor, should know how much it's going to cost you to do what you need to do and to create and get a profit, right? So you have to be mindful of that. And of course, as I said, be prepared for the unexpected because it's definitely going to happen, right? Controlling costs is extremely important, right? Because you can quickly see that cost overrun can happen very fast, right? And then, you know, you can have a successful event, but it'll turn into a fiasco if you end up, having budget overruns that usually are due to waste, fraud, and abuse. Okay, normally it's because people feel like they don't. It's hard to make a connection sometimes with the actual budget and what's going on, what you're doing, right? And connecting those costs and people to understand like this is a real number and that what you're doing is contributing to that number going up or down. So the longer lunch break you take over, 6 month period, the longer it's gonna take you to do something, the more it's gonna cost, right? Or maybe you take a week off, or instead of doing it, in this amount of time, you're taking this amount of time because you decided that you wanted to do something else, or maybe this is a fire issue or a weather issue, right? Excuse me, which happens a lot. So you want to make sure you control the cost because if you don't control the cost, you may have a successful event, but you may make no money. And if you make no money, it's really not a successful event from your perspective, right? The participants may have enjoyed it, they may have done well, and the event may have been viewed or perceived as success, but behind the scenes, you're bleeding money, right? You made no money, and you really came out as a loss, and so you have to try to make it up somewhere in the next project, right? Some other tips for controlling costs, find low cost goods and services. Use working budget and spreadsheets so you can track the system. The expenses, right? And like I said before, you have to, a good thing to do is to kind of have a weekly meeting at least and do a reconciliation, right? You sit down with all the vested parties and you go over the budget. And you say, okay, what's your budget looking like? I need it up to date to the nearest, nearest dollar, right? And make sure maybe $100 or $1,000, depending on what the budget is and what amount you're working with, right? I need it to the nearest thousand or they quote, the nearest dollar sometimes nearest cent. They want to be very specific because all those little cents start to add up, right? And so you have to be very meticulous. You have to be very detail orientated in order to make sure that the budget doesn't go wild and you lose control of it and hence end up making no money, right? Uh, Other tips, which work well for the budget is to limit who makes the decisions on the spending amount they can authorize, right? Most companies, most events, they have a threshold. Depending on your level, you can spend $500 with no questions asked. Anything above $500 has to be bumped up to the next level, to the next, manager or next, executive. And then they have a cost threshold, a price threshold that we spend. And then once that is reached, they have to bump it up to the next level for authorization to spend that money, right? So if you control who uses your credit card and who can submit purchase orders, right? If you control who can make decisions on how much money is spent, then you have a good chance of making sure that the budget is, stays, within control. It doesn't go crazy, right? Cash flows, right? We're looking at, when exactly are we looking at receiving money and paying money out, right? Accounts receivable and accounts payable. Many instances, companies have, net 30, net 60, net 90, depending again on the size of the event, how long it's going to take to kind of reconcile and to finalize all the, the budgets and the cost overruns after the event is over. How much time do we need to kind of wrap it up do the accounting, and then figure out, okay, who needs to get paid and when, right? So usually within the contract or the RFP, there is a payment schedule, right? Is it net 30, net 60, net 90? Is it half now, half upon completion? Is it cash on delivery? There's different ways to do it, right? Is it we pay you in a year, or is it more, hey, depending on what the profit is, you'll get a portion of those proceeds. And so until we're done with that accounting, you won't get paid, but you'll get paid a portion. Like movie, like actors do, right? Actors get a base salary, and then from there, a lot of them negotiate a certain percentage of the box, right? The box sales, the ticket sales, right? And then from there, they get additional money. But that normally doesn't happen until later on, maybe 6 months down the road, they maybe get something, because there has to be a period of time where you have to designate, okay, let's look at the first 3 months of revenue, and then once we look at the first 3 months of revenues, you'll get a portion of that, and then everything thereafter you will get, but um, in order to give your money up front, here you go. This is not money up front, but money from the proceeds. Here you go. You get 5% of the ticket box office sales, and as the movie's still in movie theaters, or it goes to video, or it goes to streaming, or whatever the case may be, you still get your negotiated percentage, but it'll just come as those things occur. All right. All right. So with that, that's what we have for this week. Okay. Make sure you get in there and do your LE, do your quiz. Okay. If you have any questions or comments, please feel free to reach out to me. Just an online class, so I know it's hard to really connect at times, but please feel free to text me or call me if there's an issue. Email me preferably if there's an issue. Okay, but get your work done. If you have it work that you have not completed prior week, send me an email. I see what I can do about opening those things up and give you an opportunity to complete your work and get the points that you need. Okay. All right. Have a good week, and I will see you. I will talk to you next week.